Well, I'm sure, like every other coach, it's a thrill to be here and to have the opportunity to play. Um, some years it's like you're planning in October, and you know that if everything goes right, you have an opportunity to play in this tournament on the final weekend, and some years it goes according to plan, and other years your plan doesn't necessarily hold, and you've got to make some adjustments and all the other stuff that goes into zigging and zagging to try to get your team ready to play, and all the pitfalls that happen. And this year certainly was one of the most challenging seasons of my career, and I have a lot of admiration, and I'm really proud of my team, and especially these three, for everything they've been through the last 4 years, and for them to be here right now in this spot is probably one of the most gratifying things that I've had to experience in all my 40 years at Connecticut.
Hey, Coach. Doug Feinberg, the AP. It's good to see you. You've had some of the greatest players in the history of women's basketball play for you. You've had some of the greatest teams. You've had the greatest streaks ever. I remember you saying at one point, no one's going to care unless we lose when those streaks are going on. No one's going to put it on top of SportsCenter. No one's going to play it nationally. But it seems the last 2 years, women's basketball as a whole is getting more attention than some could say the men's tournament. I mean, the players, the names and such, the ratings. Have you seen a shift? Have you seen something that, like, we're finally getting attention we deserve as opposed to needing something like a loss after 111 straight game wins to get the attention that we're getting now?
Yeah, I think when you're in the middle of it, you maybe don't see they say the forest from the trees or something like that. But during those moments where we were getting the majority of the attention, and I remember one time somebody asked one of the coaches before the NCAA tournament, do you have a preference of who's going to win, who you want to win the NCAA tournament? And it's a long-time coach, too, and they said, I don't care as long as it's not Tennessee or Connecticut. There was this point where people were, dying for some other storyline to appear. And, and there probably were some storylines, but nobody really wanted to pay attention. There weren't enough people that they could look into what all the other storylines were, and but now, there's way more opportunities for storylines. There's more outlets for storylines, and I also think the women's games is benefiting and is going to continue to benefit from the fact that players are around long enough to create a name, create a buzz. People weren't even mentioning Caitlin Clark when Paige was a freshman, because it was all Paige. And now it's all Caitlin. So had she left after her freshman year, like it would have been if she was a guy, or Paige left, they would have had to find somebody else. And if that person wasn't there, then you wouldn't have had the ability to do all this that's happened. So I think these players staying for 4 years, staying at the same school, hopefully, gives it a chance to grow. And it gives people a chance to fall in love with these kids. So I think that's been one of the biggest, forces that I've seen from my vantage point. And I like how all these other coaches are getting a ton of attention and a lot of pressure being put on them to have to win. They always thought I had it easy. Well, now they realize, they wish that they could go back to being anonymous, and so I'm kind of relishing this.
Coach,
So,
I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Awesome. We're going to stay to our right. We're going to go to the back, and then we'll work our way back up front. I see you. I'll try and get to everybody.
Danielle Lerner, Houston Chronicle. Along those same lines, Geno, there have been so many phenomenal individual matchups throughout this tournament, and it seems like a large portion of the coverage is devoted to those matchups. Do you think that women's college basketball as a whole has become more star-driven in the past, like 10 years or so?
I believe so. It's a star-driven society that we live in. You know, it's a celebrity-driven, star-driven, influencer-driven, you know, world that's been created. And, you know, we always talk about the evolution of women's basketball, you know, and how we started so much later than the men did, and it takes a little bit of time to catch up. And I felt like our run was, you know, described by other people as, you know, the UCLA time of the 70s, okay? And Magic and Bird, TV all of a sudden started paying more attention. People don't realize that when all those teams were winning all those games back then, there wasn't really a lot of attention placed on. You know, Final Fours on the men's side were being played in 18,000 seat arenas, and I'm not sure they completely sold out, you know? But then all of a sudden, those two particular players came on, and it just lit everything up, and it just took off from there. So it needs some stars. It needs people that have the right personality, the right game, and we have that now. And it's not that we didn't have it before. You know, all those great, just using our example, all those great Tennessee, Connecticut games, they were all Hall of Famers playing against each other on a national stage. But it was then. And now those same types of players are really benefiting from all of this. They've been there before, but it's just feels different now.
We're going to stay to our right. We'll go to Nancy. We're going to work our way back to the gentleman in the striped shirt, and then I'll work my way up.
Geno, Nancy Armour, USA Today Sports. Kind of following up on that, we've seen times where it looked like women's teams or women's sports was kind of going to get over the hump. 96 Olympics, some of your teams, 99 World Cup. Does this feel different, and why do you think that is?
I remember I used to, I didn't know how to feel when people, friends of mine and just people in general, would, you know, we would get 16,000 people for every one of our games because we had Diana. And everybody said, yeah, you know, she's the only player I like to watch because she plays like a guy. Like that was the defining, that was the validation that you needed to have in order for anyone to appreciate who you are, what your talents are, what you bring, you know, as an athlete, forget as a woman or as a man. And fans of women's basketball were fans of their teams. So when it got to the biggest stage, if your team wasn't involved, there wasn't like a national consciousness of, hey, we need to watch this. And I think it's gone beyond that, that now, because of what some of these kids have done, you know, they've created a fan base of women's basketball that they'll watch a great women's game, regardless of whether they have a rooting interest or not in the game, that they will go to the game, not just because it's their team playing, but, you know, that's taken some time, but it's there now. And where it goes from here, I think is going to be really, really important. You know, I think it's a moment, like people are saying, but it's more than a moment, you know? Sometimes moments become minutes, and minutes become hours, and hours become days, and next thing you know, it becomes part of the national pastime.
Coach, we're going to stay to our right on the back corner.
Coach, Dan Lobby, Cleveland.com. You mentioned Paige's freshman year. It was all Paige. Had she stayed healthy, how do you think people would be talking about her today? Would she have the same profile, do you think, as Caitlin?
Same profile? They have two different types of games, you know? I think when your team wins and wins a lot, I think you draw a lot of attention to yourself. You know, when people say, who's the best player? Well, who's the best team? I mean, that's as it happens in the pros, right? Who's the best player in the country? Who's the most valuable player in America? Well, let's go look at the best team and pick their best player. That's usually a pretty good guess. And had we kept winning, I don't know that Paige would be any bigger or less talked about, and I don't know that she would have the kind of impact that Caitlin's had, because they have different personalities, different games. They approach the game differently, and it works for both of them. So I don't know, but it would have been nice to find out.
We're going to come up. We're going to do the second row, the gentleman in the gray shirt. I see you. And then we'll work our way over.
Geno, Kenny Rhoda, WHBC Radio. With Paige and Caitlin, you mentioned Bird and Magic, and they elevated the college game. That's when March Madness really kind of kicked off. But then they took it to the NBA level, and that grew. Can Paige and Caitlin do that for the WNBA?
They can. They can. But like I've said before, there were a lot of great NBA players before Magic and Larry Bird. And so why didn't it happen? People didn't make it happen. So those two guys, because they did it in college and people saw them play a lot, they wanted to follow them after they left. So the WNBA hasn't had the benefit of these great players that have come along. They didn't have the following. They didn't have the hysteria that these kids have. So there wasn't a, I want to follow them. So hopefully this will change that narrative. But the WNBA is going to have to do a great job of marketing these guys. And the WNBA, I don't think, has done a great enough job of marketing their individual stars for whatever reason, because there's been a lot of them. And maybe now I think it'll change. But certainly they've laid the groundwork for it, 100%.
We're going to stay in this row, the gentleman with the teal. Then we'll go this direction.
Joe Zone, CBS Hartford. Geno, a lot of players might get caught up in a one-on-one showdown on national TV. What is it about Paige that will not allow her to get caught up in that?
Who says it won't? I mean, kids are competitive. They want to win. They know what's going on out there. They know who's who. They know what's what. And Caitlin comes down and makes a huge three. Don't think that Paige is going to pass the next one up and pass it to somebody. So I think there will be a little bit of that, but it won't be, if I score more points than Caitlin, Connecticut's going to win. It won't be that at all. And it won't be, I have to match everything that she does. That's what I was saying. Paige's personality is such that she'd rather score 10 points and us win than get 50 and us lose. So I think it's going to be about winning the game more than anything else.
Coach, we're going to take a question to our left. If you could raise your hand so Coach can see you.
Geno, Nick Camino from WKYC TV here in Cleveland. Yesterday we had an opportunity, we were covering USA basketball practice, and Diana Taurasi was there, and we were talking about how there's always storylines and narratives, and everybody's saying, you guys aren't supposed to be here, and Diana assured me, she said, you kind of expected to be there. So I'm wondering if you can balance that storyline of, hey, we're not supposed to be here, almost an underdog mentality, which feels weird for you, and for her to say, trust me, they expected to be there.
If you'd have talked to me in June this year, I would tell you, yeah, it was going to be us in South Carolina playing for the national championship. And then as things started to happen, I started to believe something different. You have to be realistic. And we live in a world at UConn where the expectations are unrealistic. But you have to be realistic. You have to look at your team and you have to say, do we have an answer for everything that happens? And if the answer is no, then you just have to cross your fingers and hope that that thing doesn't happen, or those two things that you know you have no answer for. Okay, so there's a lot of things we don't have an answer for in tomorrow's game. Now, does that mean that we just wanted to hope we make the round of 64 and then see what happens? No, because our players will tell you this. They say, you know, playing at Connecticut is the greatest thing ever. But playing at Connecticut is hard as hell, because if two guys foul out tomorrow, we're supposed to be able to compete 5 against 3, because that's the illogical, delusional, you know, expectations that exist up there. So yeah, there was always, yeah, we can get there, but everything has to be done perfectly. And in my mind, I had a lot of plans for this weekend. This didn't include this.
Coach, we'll take our final question. Back row to the right, if you could raise your hand so Coach can see you.
Thanks a lot. Aaron Barzilai from Her Hoop Stats. Coach, even with everything that you've accomplished and the program's accomplished in your time there, there's probably millions of people watching a UConn women's basketball game for the first time on Friday night. What do you hope they take away about you and about the program when they're reflecting on it tomorrow or Saturday or something like that?
You know, that's the one thing that we probably, you know, we don't talk about winning a lot, and we don't discuss winning a lot at UConn. Svetlana Abrasimova, my Russian kid, taught me that. You know, Coach, why do we always talk about winning a national championship? Everybody knows that's why we're here, so stop talking about it. So we don't talk about that a lot, but we do talk about you cannot manage people's perception of you, who you are, what you are. And the world that these kids live in, that we all live in, is everybody has an opinion of you, and they don't know you, they don't never met you, they don't know anything about you, so they see you one time, and right away they formulate an opinion, good or bad, okay? So there's a lot of people that hope we lose by 100 on Friday. And there's a lot of people that hope we win by 100. So there are some people that are going to watch us for the very first time and say, what's the big deal about these people? And hopefully they see that we play basketball a certain way, and that we try to conduct ourselves a certain way, and that our game looks a certain way, and that, you know, we are who we are and we compete, and what you think of us or what your impression of us is, I have no control over that. But you know, one thing that I've noticed over the years that's happened, when people see us play for the very first time, 2 things happen. One, they fall in love with all my players because of the way they play and the way they conduct themselves. And they go, yeah, he really is a shithead. So those 2 things will still be true on Friday.